Hi everyone, Mr. Silbaugh here, and this is my take on Unit 9, Lesson 9. So in the last lesson, what we talked about was the factors of making your website mobile friendly. Remember, the whole focus of this mobile part of the unit is the fact that a lot of your website users are going to be accessing your website on a mobile device rather than on a computer like it has been for many, many years. So in the last lesson, we talked about how to make your website more mobile friendly, and you got to remember it's a key demographic you can't ignore. As time goes on, this is going to be really, really huge, and you can't leave out your mobile users. So it's very important that you take the steps to make your website more mobile friendly. Now, you may have noticed that in this entire unit, while we were talking about mobile devices, we spent the past 4 lessons talking, or 3 lessons talking about mobile um, websites and making your website more mobile friendly. But we never actually did any coding for it and ways to actually do it. It's not covered in this class. This is just a basic web design class, again, just to go over the basic concepts. It's not going to be covered in here. If you were to take another course in web design and go beyond this class, then yes, you would more likely talk about it. But again, this is just a basic introductory course into web design with you practicing some features. But this chapter is more about exploring the technologies in web design that are beyond what are normally talked about. So if you are curious about making your website more mobile friendly, you could check out tutorials online, or you could take another course in the future in web design where this would be covered more heavily. So this whole last part, we're done talking about mobile websites and mobile website design. We're now moving into technologies that are used on the web now. This whole last lesson covers stuff that is considered the latest technology. Some of this is technology that's been around for a few years now. So I wouldn't necessarily say it's the latest, but it's some of the more recent developments of the internet and the web. So we're going to talk about this. The next unit, because this is the last lesson of this unit, the next unit is going to be talking about web design for business applications, and it's going to be more heavily focused on business. So this is the last unit talking more about web design itself. So the latest technologies, back in the day, Mr. Silbaugh definitely remembers this time, pages were very static. I could easily show you some websites that are still available today that were designed back in the early 90s that were considered the very basics of web design. And because of that, web pages were mostly used for information. They weren't made for you to access content, weren't made for you to stream material. It was all about just being able to access information. And that was one of the biggest selling points of the internet back in the day, was that you could access information and find what you needed to find quickly. You used to have to go to like a library or another place to find information. But now that the internet has become so widespread, it used to be that you would just use the internet for information, and that was it. Now there's more an open approach to using the web these days. When I say open approach, the internet embraces everyone, the good and the bad. There's more of a focus of information sharing and collaboration. What this means is you're sharing information back and forth. It used to be that one person was sharing information and the user, would receive that information by looking it up, searching for it, so on and so forth. And because of that, there's more content now, and there's no restrictions of what is produced. Now, of course, the text doesn't cover this, but you have to be careful about what you post on the internet. The internet is for everyone. The internet can be accessed by all, but you have to remember that, you are responsible for what you post and what you put on and publish to the internet. So you have to keep that in mind. The internet is for good, and the internet can be used for bad. But we like to focus on the good. We know that we have many communities and services now, unlike before. Now we have social networking websites. We started with MySpace and then Facebook. Now we've moved into Instagram and Snapchat and all of that. We've come a long way from what it used to be. We also have video sharing, YouTube, wikis, which are make your own websites without any coding knowledge, blogs, feeds, podcasts, and more. There's so much that we have created over the past few years that has truly made the internet a place for everyone and a place for sharing and a place for more than just accessing information than what it used to be. It's now become a resource to create and distribute content instead of just finding content. Now, users can create their own content and distribute their own content as they see fit. The text does mention something called AJAX, which is called asynchronous JavaScript and XML programming. It's a programming method that allows web applications to interact with users like desktop applications. So think about how you would access Microsoft Word on your desktop. You would click on it, you would access it, and it would open up. AJAX is similar, only instead of it being on your desktop, it's now online, and it could be accessed using online methods. You can create an interactive web application using XHTML, CSS3, the document object model, JavaScript, and XML HTTP request. This was a new one that I found out about myself. The text defines as an API used to transfer XML and other text data between the server and browser. That's what makes it possible for the data to be transferred and put into the between the server where it's stored and the browser where it's accessed. So those things all combine together to make really unique interactive web applications, which would never have been possible back in the day. One of the other features that's talked about in the text is personalizing a page using third-party applications. This has grown in the past few years where, third-party applications, what that means is it used to be you were using one person and yourself to create content. So when I say one person, I might mean where your website is stored, the server where your website is stored on. That was the person. You would interact between those two people, you, yourself, and the server, and that's where it would be. Nowadays, there's third party. Third party means that it's someone separate, not related to you publishing the content and the server holding that content. Now there's things called third party applications where another party, another person, is involved. And so the third party applications are separate programs from other companies that you can bring in and use on your website. They can increase functionality and usability, but they may slow down the page. It's one of the big things there. One of the ones that they mentioned is called iGoogle Portal. In the text, you can make your own homepage with content tailored to your own wants and needs. Like if you want weather, you can put an application for weather. You can put an application for news. But if you're like, oh, I don't need the weather, you can not have that. You can customize it to whatever you need. There's Google Gadgets, and there are many applications and they're built using HTML and JavaScript. If you're really curious about this, the lab 99 and the text covers this, and you can create your own iGoogle portal if you so desire, but I'm not requiring it for this course. Web feeds. So this one, I have a bit of a personal connection to because I learned about this back when I was in college. I learned about this, I want to say, over 10 years ago is when I learned about web feeds, but they've come a long way since that time. Web feeds are a data format for delivering web content that is updated frequently. Think about it as like breaking news. When you do what's called a web feed, you essentially subscribe to it, And whenever you subscribe to it, you get a list of all of the stuff that was published and related to what you're looking for. You can view headlines and updates from your favorite website without you actually needing to go to that website or opening your browser. So the one that I learned about and the one that's still around today is called RSS, and it's really simple syndication, or RDF site summary, or rich site summary. I always learned it as really simple syndication. That was why, but apparently it also has two other names to attach to it. This was the original web feed, and what it was is in your web browser, you would subscribe to it, like say your favorite news website, you would subscribe to it, and then you would get a feed, a list of all of the articles from that website from that day. And it would be in a nice long list. And in some instances, you would be able to read just the headline of it and say, oh, I know what's going on. And if you really wanted to, you could click on it and it would take you to the actual website. In some cases nowadays, you can click on them and they give you the summary of it without you actually having to visit the website. Another one, and I hadn't heard about this one until I looked at the text, is called Atom. It's a recent development, but it's more feature driven than RSS. RSS is very simple. It's just you looking at the web page or you subscribing to the web page, so to speak, and giving you the headlines from the pages, like new posts, new news stories, things of that nature. Atom has more of a focus on the metadata here, and that's the what, who, when, where. What was published, who published it, when was it published, where was it published. Metadata is data about data. I know that makes no sense, but it's essentially the data about all of the data, okay? If you're curious about that, please let me know, because Mr. Silbaugh does really like metadata, and that's one of his research interests. But Atom has more of a focus on the metadata aspect of it. It's not just the story, it's more about all of the stuff associated with the story. Podcasts. So these next two ones I am going to talk about, but I also have to talk about them like you've never experienced them before and have no idea what they are. So if I end up sounding a little like bored here, it's because some of this stuff I know you guys already know and are quite familiar with, but I'm going to go through it because some of you may not know about these features, but I'm going to assume most of you do. So podcasts are similar to RSS feeds in which a user downloads audio or video files to computers or mobile devices. More frequently, you're accessing these on mobile devices. You can make your own, and you can also publish them online if you have a topic that you're really interested in. You can publish your own podcast if you so desire, but there's a lot of podcasts out there on various topics. You can also index the files so that an RSS feed reader can subscribe to them, or a user can subscribe to them. They're different than streaming content because they can be syndicated, subscribed to, and downloaded automatically as new content is added. So essentially, if you find a podcast you really like, you can subscribe to it, and then it will download every time there's a new episode of that podcast. You may be familiar with it. Apple makes it really easy to subscribe to podcasts because Apple has their own app. I'm sure Android has something, or there's something for Android users. But you can subscribe to different ones. You can browse and find your favorite podcasts, and then you can download them, and so on and so forth. Okay. I'm pretty sure most of you know what a podcast is and what they're capable of doing. Now for the last one, which is my favorite one to talk about because everyone knows about this nowadays, is streaming, okay? But you may be surprised about some of this too, because streaming is a relatively modern invention in terms of web design. Streaming service, this allows you to access and view media as it's transmitted to your device, okay? So, back in the day, this would not have been possible. It's an audio and video file transmission, and it's done essentially as you access the content, it plays, and it's playing while the rest of it is still loading while you're playing it. Um, it's kind of live, except unless you're doing live streaming, then that's actually live. Streaming is a relatively new feature because of high-speed internet. If it wasn't for high-speed internet, streaming would not exist. And I say this because back in the day, the text even mentions that it would take 30 minutes to a half hour to download a song. Okay, not even kidding you. Mr. Silbaugh is very familiar with this. Went through this when he was younger and when he was your age. It was very, very intense to download a song or download a video. Usually what you would do is if you wanted something like a song or a video to download and watch on your computer, you'd click download and then you could go to your chores, to your laundry, cook something, bake something, and come back and still find that your file had not downloaded completely yet. I remember as a kid there would be times where I would get a video and start downloading the video and then go to bed and then wake up the next morning and still have time left for it to download. Yeah, those were very dark times back in the day. We're much more spoiled now that we have streaming where we can access content easily and it's downloaded relatively quickly. It is different from downloading media though, and the text mentions this. When you download something, you download it and then you can access it. Streaming is different because as soon as you click play, it will start playing and you're able to access it then and there. Live streaming has come out of this as well. Live streaming is when you yourself are creating your own content, going live, and so people can access the content that way through live streaming. And you all are very familiar with many streaming services, Netflix, HBO Go, Hulu, all of them. There's so many today. Also, the text mentions Twitch for those of you who stream games. There's so many streaming platforms out there. It's really, really unbelievable how far we've come. All right. In review, due to new features, the web is more advanced these days than when it first began, and it's because of high-speed internet that a lot of these features are possible. Third-party applications like web and web feeds, podcasts, streaming, they're all relatively new, and they're making the web more advanced each day. Okay, so this is the conclusion for Unit 9. I'll be posting the review for the next lesson, so you're going to want to start reviewing the content for your test that will be happening very soon. All right, that's going to do it for this video.